Hey,
Oh,
how's it going?
there you go. Andrew, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Not too bad, not too bad for a Tuesday morning. I don't get to focus on real life. I'm here talking about Porsche, so it's all good.
Yeah, well, you're living better than I am. I'm trying to sneak in Porsches in between real life this morning. So it's one of
Well,
the upsides of working from home, I guess. It's being able to
yeah,
do
I
stuff
know,
like
right?
this here and there.
Yeah. I started my day at about 6 o'clock this morning, so I feel pretty good about taking a half-hour break to talk Porsches.
I think you've earned it. Sounds like it.
I think so too. I think you have. Let's enjoy.
Sounds good.
So I've got myself a coffee here. I'm an hour behind you. This is my Porsche cooled mug from Cool Collective. Do you follow Drew's work on Cool Collective?
I do actually. I would say that Drew's probably the one person most responsible for kind of getting me into the idea of building a channel, actually. So I
Oh,
came
really?
across his YouTube channel first,
Yeah.
and then his Instagram stuff. But dude is a master at what he does. And I had the unique opportunity actually to meet and shoot with him at DRT last year in Miami, which was awesome.
Oh, really? Oh, nice. I want to make it to an event like that. I haven't done anything outside of Minnesota for a while.
Yeah, DRT is worth going to. It's the largest show that's all Porsche that I'm aware of anywhere,
Yeah.
outside of probably something like Rennsport, but
Okay.
it it's incredible. And if you're from the north, so it's in February typically. I don't know what they're going to do in 21,
Yeah.
but if you're from where you are, it's a great excuse to go hang out in some amazing weather. In February, it's like a breath of fresh air down there. It's like 78, sunny, palm trees. I mean, it's awesome.
You see, that's still a bit too hot for my liking.
Yeah, well, so yeah, you might like overpack, right? You're gonna still bring what you have, which is the lightest, which is probably that hoodie. So
Exactly. Yeah. Flip-flops and hoodie. That if I could
yeah.
just live like that forever, that would be awesome.
All right, plenty of shops to pick up some shorts and t-shirts down there. So that's the good news.
Nice. Well, yeah, Drew, I think when it was 911 cool, Drew was getting started around the same time I was getting started with auto amateur. And I was so intimidated by his content, frankly, and just his character and his style that I nearly gave up actually, because I thought if that's the bar that people are setting, what am I doing? And I reached out to him, and I think I bought like the prints that you can kind of see behind me are his.
Hmm.
Um, and he was so gracious, really friendly, really supportive. And so maybe in a similar way, he kind of helped inspired me and inspired you to keep going and to do something. I still follow all this stuff, and I'm like, if I could spend like $50 a day on anything, it would probably be his prints and just fill this
Yeah,
fridge
yeah. No,
with.
I just ordered his calendar, which if you've been following along, he's put a ton of work into a retro car calendar. It looks pretty
Yeah,
pretty sharp. But
yeah,
yeah, he's super down to earth. I mean, when I met him in Miami, it was amazing. It's just very humble, and I think really appreciates hearing from folks that are saying, "Hey, look, I saw your stuff, and now this is why I'm into my channel." And
yeah,
so yeah, I got to give him the credit. He's a big part of the inspiration, and he's been doing it for a while.
yeah,
10 years or more, I think. And
yeah,
so he'll tell you, be the first to tell you where he's at in terms of look and feel of photos, and his channel and everything was not an overnight success. I mean, it was a labor of love for sure. It
yeah,
still is. So
yeah, totally. So I came across you a while back by looking at one of your videos, but it wasn't until I heard you on Michael Batt's podcast recently that I kind of connected the dots. Um, and I've been following your 991 build series. As you know, I've got a 991 and I've
mhm.
been modding it. And as much as I like to create YouTube content and I spend a lot of time thinking about my content and making it, I probably also spend an equal amount of time watching other people's content. And this year I've been really pleasantly surprised by finding your channel, finding Andy at Last Rasp over in Australia, and like Michael Bath flipping from videos to podcasts, what just out of circumstance while he's in Bahrain. It's been a really awesome year. So I've been looking forward to talking to you about your 991 build because I like modding. I like my 991. I have a 996 side over here as well. But I've got the first thing I want to ask you is why the 991? Because somebody with your kind of flair and like your content is really sharp. I really like how you produce your content.
Thanks.
I would expect you to be an air cool guy. And
Yeah,
I
well, I
hope you don't
was.
take offense to that, but that's
Yeah,
what
I
I want.
was. So right before I had the 991, I had a 993. So I started 996. That's a car I inherited if you listen to Michael's podcast.
Yeah,
This is a whole story there I won't go into, but go check out Michael's channel and go listen to that.
Porsche cool.
But yeah, so, I did get an air cooled first. Is kind of the first car I purchased myself. And it was a 97 993. And, to your point, like the aesthetic, kind of all that was what drew me to the car,
Yeah,
both driving experience, but also what I could do with it from a looks perspective. And I really enjoyed that car, but I will tell you, as awesome as the car was, as beautiful as it looked, we have, as you probably know, some of the best mountain roads in America right
Yeah.
here, 2 hours from my house. So I can get to Tail of the Dragon, those kinds of things, let's say 3 hours or so, if I go straight through. And
17.
so,
It took us 17 hours
yeah.
to drive
So,
there.
and people do that, right? They drive all the way from
Yeah.
California, I mean, to go, run the tail and Cherahalla and all that. So for me, it was going up to either the hour and a half, 2 hours north of Atlanta, which still is good roads up by Helen and it's a little Bavarian town and some stuff up there, or up to like the P Car Club Drive, which we did just back in August. And quickly realizing, as cool as the 993 is, I was really anxious for some performance. That's the 996 I had was a 99, and it's not that it doesn't have performance, but the 996, horsepower wise and just
Yeah.
all those elements, it wasn't really there, right? It's an older car. It's coming up on 20 some years. So I really wanted to experience the newer 991 just for the pure performance and capability standpoint. But I also knew that I thought, and I think so far successfully as I build it, I could do the aesthetics and kind of all that stuff with that car. I think that car obviously is in higher volumes. I think less people do less to that car. So certainly put like wheels on it or that kind of stuff, but
Yeah.
very few people do major modifications to the 991, I think.
Yeah.
There are other variants where I think people say, I don't want to put the work in, so let me just go get a GT3 or
Yeah.
GT2 RS or whatever, which is just a variant of that. But for me, I want to do a performance build with some aesthetics in the 991. And so far, I'm pretty pleased with the ownership experience. The car's a beast. I mean, when you go from a 993 that's
Yeah.
280 stock horsepower, and let's see, 22 years later, who knows what it was making?
Yeah.
Probably 250, right? Going to a Carrera S, I mean, it's nuts. I mean, it's like a totally different vehicle.
Yeah.
And so it's been really enjoyable. Michael asked me how long I would keep it. I think I made the mistake of 993 saying for a very long time, and I kept it for roughly a year, which is sort of nuts in hindsight. But look, I had a really interesting opportunity to get into a 991 for very little additional cost, believe it or not. And so that's the current project, but I'm loving it.
Yeah. So what do you got on your plans now for the next like 6 months? Winter is a great time, especially here in the Twin Cities, to
Yeah.
do mods.
Yeah. So those who know me here in Atlanta will tell you that I do these builds pretty quickly, which maybe is part of the problem because I get through them so fast that I'm sort of ready for the next. So I've done probably about 80% of what I was going to do the 991 already, and I'm only had it for about 2 months. But that is everything from wheels and springs to lower the car to performance upgrades in the way of ECU tunes. I put a Cobb tune on the car. I am installing a DSC controller in the car. Did a lot of styling mods from accent calipers to seat belts to full Tech Art aero kit on the car.
Yeah.
And then the one item, which is going to be last, which is probably fitting, which I'm most excited about, and is how I found your channel more recently in terms of just searching for info, is my Soul exhaust was supposed to ship yesterday. So I reached out to him this morning. They're double checking what the status is. I'm like, give me some tracking, give me something, man. It's a long lead item, as you probably know right now. They're just slammed because they're so popular. So, so I'm hoping and praying I get a tracking number in my inbox this morning, but that should be here in the next few days. And that, to your point, is a perfect project over the holiday to get under the car and do the install myself. So I got the rear section first, valve exhaust. I'm going to do that. And then, I've obviously been watching your videos on headers, no headers, what I want to do. So I'm on that journey that I know you just finished.
Amazing. And are you going to wire the valve exhaust into the PSE button?
I am, yeah. So my car came with PSE, so it'll be wired into the factory button, which is good. I mean, I live in a neighborhood where I'm probably the only car guy in the neighborhood, to be honest, at this level. And so having the valve exhaust is going to be helpful. It already is. Just popping that button as I'm making my right into the neighborhood, and it's so remarkable how quickly that muffles the sound on the PSE. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a huge advantage. That was a lot of the selling point on the Soul system. I mean, several others obviously have that valve component, but not all of them, as you know.
It's so good. The Fister mufflers I put on my 997 and the Soul performance exhaust I put on my 991 are probably my two favorite mods that I've done overall with all the cars that I've owned in the last few years. Especially on the 991, it's still a 911, but it's just even more engaging and it's even more exhilarating. It's really hard to explain. You just get that immediate buzz. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and I mean a lot of the when I was looking at 991s, a lot of the back and forth in my mind, but also in the user space, as you know, was dot one versus dot two. I really was not quite sure.
Yeah,
Price was a lot of my driver because again, this was kind of a really unique dot one that I was able to very easily get out of a 993 and right into this for not much cost at all.
yeah,
So ultimately, that was really steering me towards the dot one anyway. But you know, to me, the exhaust piece of these cars is almost sort of sacred. And I know there's an amazing amount of reason to go with a dot two. And so I'm in an interesting spot where I'm hoping that this 991 build series I'm doing is helpful because on one hand, I really want the dot one for the exhaust. The price point, in my opinion, especially if you're going to do a build, I
yeah,
think it's incredible value for money on a dot one. But I also want to get horsepower gains and do tunes and run in the mountains. And so it's sort of in conflict, to be honest.
yeah.
And so it'd be interesting to see how the dust settles of like, was the soul exhaust and kind of that NA note and kind of to your point, like that, just experience worth the trade-offs of not having a dot two and kind of the infinite tunability that it is and all that. So stay tuned. But
That,
I think that's the most interesting experiment for me about this 991 build is what's that balance between the obvious upside and performance of the dot two versus the purity, call it, of the dot
yeah.
one.
You see, I think we could spend 10 seconds or 10 days having that conversation about the dot one versus the dot two. I mean, in some respects, I always like to try and make things as easy as possible.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a speed guy and a power guy, you go for the dot two. If you want the experience and the thrill, you got the 991.1 and you make those changes. And generally speaking, I think that's the decision point, but it's way more complicated than that. But what I will say is, when I put the valved exhaust on the 991.1, there was no horsepower gain. Maybe you get 5 if you dynoed it, and these dot ones don't dyno very well anyway. According to the dyno, this has got 200 horses, which still,
I've seen posts about this. It's
which my
like,
friends
how is
still
that
wind
possible?
me up about all the time.
Yeah.
But with the valves open, that experience, especially driving somewhere like Tail of the Dragon, going up and down through the gears and letting it hang in the high revs as you go down to a second gear and you go into the turn, the sound of the engine, and then as you pull out of that corner, I couldn't care less if I had 300 horses or 600 horses. That
Yeah.
sound, that feeling, that's what I live for with these cars. And
Yeah.
that's why I think
Well,
dot one's for me.
yeah, like I said, I'm coming from 993. So, that's the
Yeah,
context, right? Which is I already made that trade-off of
yeah, yeah,
visceral like user experience versus pure power.
yeah.
And so I do think I'll be happy and satisfied. When I ran up at the tail last, we had several folks with some Soul exhausts. One was on a turbo, so that was actually interesting to hear, as well as a 997, 996, I think. Well, I know it's 996, Buddy Mike. So that's been interesting. The big upside though on the exhaust piece, the thing, I'm going to make a video on mine, of course, and you have, and it's just hard to capture right on a video in terms of sound and just the feel versus being in the car. Luckily for me, I've got a good buddy here in town who has a 991.1 with the
Mm-hmm.
Soul exhaust on it, who I spend a good bit of time driving around town with. So I've heard the car on pulls, regular driving, start up, rev, the whole thing basically. So I've had a good preview of this exhaust on this particular car, which is unique. But yeah, suggest anyone obviously watching, if you're thinking about exhaust, if at all possible, trying to use videos online, it's just not gonna give you a sense. And
Yeah,
I've had several people put different exhausts, other companies, where they've kind of been a little bit disappointing. They're like, man, that doesn't sound anything like I thought it was going to based on the video. It's like,
yeah.
well, it's just that's a really hard thing to capture properly, in a video. So, but yeah, that's exciting. It's coming, so I'm anxious. And the guys over at Soul did me a solid, and they're going to do some satin black tips,
Oh,
which
nice.
are not an available option for that particular valve exhaust, but something that really will go with the build I'm doing. So anxious to see how they execute that as well.
And who are you dealing with the Soul? Is it John or Mike?
John, yeah, yeah.
John,
So yeah, these guys have
fantastic
been,
guy.
yeah, they're great. I mean, they're you can tell why they're on the things and why people are interested. I mean, they make a great product and they're very accessible as
Yeah,
people, and always kind of iterating, which I like. It seems like they're
exactly.
very interested in user feedback. He reached out and said, hey, we want to definitely engage you and understand your feedback and let us
Yeah,
know how the install goes because you can do it yourself and just all these things. They really want to engage the community.
yeah. I mean, the company's been around for what, 3 or 4 years, and they're into
Yeah,
the
not long.
second iteration of that valve exhaust for the 991.
Exactly.
That's pretty phenomenal considering the amount of lead time you typically need to do R&D.
Agreed. Yeah. So what's on your list for the 991? I know that you recently took it out of the Smurf blue and back to I think the
Yeah,
stock color, right?
that's right. I'm now back to the A-gate, R-gate gray, whatever it's called.
Gotcha.
My local car club nickname is no longer Papa Smurf. It's the Gray Goose. Um,
Gotcha. Well, at least they had a name ready and waiting
yeah,
after the
exactly.
color change.
Gray Goose, not bad. Hopefully, I don't have the same face as Goose from Top Gun, but we'll see.
Right. Exactly.
Um, you know what? I'm like, with my cars, I'm always in two minds. Every time I finish a mod, I enjoy it for a while, and then I think, do I go one more and do something else, or do I look at a new car? Because, similar to you, you said you go through your build pretty quickly. I don't necessarily go through it quickly, but once I tackle the top 4 or 5 priorities I want for the car, I then start thinking about what the next car is going to look like. And, in 5 years, I've had 4 911s, and so as much as I want to keep this for as long as possible, I know at some point I'm going to cycle out of it. But I've gone blue, I've now gone gray. I've added my red touches. I've done the instrument cluster, the tack in the center. I've done the sports chrono gauge face. I've got I've got the red seat belts. I kind of think stylistically now I'm done. Maybe I'll go one step further and do the calipers. But the challenge I've got there is I don't want to be a faker. If I powder coat my calipers red, I've got the base. It's not an S.
Yep.
That
Color's
to me
tricky.
is faking it.
Yeah, color's really interesting. I get, I told Michael this in the podcast, but for as much work as I put into and expense, and like the turbo look kit I put on the 993, which is a pretty hard thing to source, obviously, or the Tech Art kit, for
Yeah.
instance, on 991, like I get more compliments on the damn brake calipers and seatbelts than anything, which
Yeah,
part of me is like, I could have just done that and probably been just as cool to everybody I drive around with because they're like, oh man, your calipers, your belts, like that's your signature.
yeah.
So it's like, yeah, but guys, remember like all this other stuff, Ford wheels, aero kit, like tune, all the stuff I spent money on.
Like, yeah,
No,
yeah.
they're like these calipers are awesome. So color is really tricky. The first one I did on the 993, I did in that roof green, and that was total happenstance. I mean, I was thinking about a greenish colorway. What I usually do, because I always do seatbelts and calipers together, what I usually do is start with either Seatbelt Planet or Safety Restore, which are the two sources I usually use to re-web my belts. Get their swatches that I'm interested in. If it's green, maybe get their 10 greens, and then start to use those against the calipers. Because the caliper, I do all my own calipers. So I just
You
use it
do?
like so I just use like a G2 kit, which personally I think is spectacular. There is a lot of value to powder coating. I'm not knocking it. If people want to do that, then go do it. But in a custom color for $160, you get enough paint to do the entire caliper. You can take the caliper off if you're ambitious, want to do that. You can do it on a lift or on jack stands. I mean, it's simpler than people think, and it's all self-leveling. So when I
Yeah.
tell people I did my own, they're like, no way, these things look professionally done. But G2 can match any color for the most part for about that 160 for all 4 calipers.
Yeah.
So I usually start there. What is the seatbelt color? And I got some greens. My wife really liked one in particular, and then I just happened to be holding that near the box that these wheels came in and said, well, goodness, that's pretty much the roof green. It's that forest color. This one was trickier because I'd already done green, so that was out. And then to your point, I was like, I want to do red. I can't do yellow. I can't do X, Y, and Z because they're factory colors that indicate a certain trim level.
Right.
And
Right.
I'm totally with you. Like when I did the aero kit on the 991, I was really, really specific, as easy as it is, to not get a like GT3 wing or any GT3 front bumper. I mean, it's super easy to do that to those Carrera S's or base Carreras, right? But I'm all for not trying to be something you're not. I think that totally diminishes the concept. So yeah, the brake calipers are tricky because you got like 3 or 4 colors that would make a lot of sense that are off the table if that's your mantra.
Yeah.
Thanks to Porsche. Now, by design, because they want you to buy a turbo or
Exactly.
something else. But yeah, it's tricky. So yeah, I guess no electric green, no red, no yellow for the most part. But there's some great blues out there. There's some beautiful greens out there. You could always go with something wild like an orange, lava orange, for instance. So
Well, so the lava orange is on the 996 right now, which I really like how it contrasts against the blue that we've done. But you're right. Like, so the red is out, yellow is out. I had yellow on my 997, and as much as I like the look of it against the black, I felt like a bit of a faker. The acid green out. I can't go blue now because I've just taken the blue wrap off the car, and I've now gone with a red tack. So what I was thinking of doing actually is just doing high gloss black. which is a factory option that you can add to any Carrera. It'll look better than the scrubbed up, like, you know, bleached out gray that unfortunately
Right.
the basic calipers turn into. So I thought high gloss black against the gray exterior with my satin platinum rims might actually look pretty sweet.
Yeah, I mean, gray is so versatile. I mean, that is the one thing I missed a little bit about the 993 was Argent Silver. It's just it's such a good base palette to do all kinds of stuff. So yeah, you can go simple, and just the contrast of that gloss black against the gray paint is gonna pop, right?
Yeah,
Because the paint reads a little bit more neutral. So
yeah.
yeah, all sounds good, but yeah, let me know if you want to talk about how to do it yourself, because
Well,
I
I think maybe
definitely
I
am a
will.
big fan.
So my one worry of doing the calipers myself, which was instinctively what I learned to first, was that the paint will run because I'm not a painter. I'm not.
No chance of that. The way that you apply it, it's idiot proof. I promise you. It's very use a brush to apply
Are
it.
you
It's not
sure?
a
I
not a
am an
spray on.
idiot.
Yeah, it literally is idiot proof. The one thing that is interesting about it, you'll do a first coat and you'll be like, oh my God, I screwed this up. Like this is a disaster, because it looks terrible after the first coat. But once you do at least 3 or 4 coats on the calipers, the self-leveling and just whatever chemical makeup of this G2 stuff is really remarkable. I mean, it
Okay.
literally is idiot proof. It self-levels, it doesn't bubble, it doesn't run. If you go slow and do, for instance, 4 coats instead of trying to do it in two, right? Or 3 instead of two, as long as you take your time and don't overcoat it,
Yeah.
it's almost impossible to mess up.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And you get to touch it up yourself, which is
Yeah.
long-term cost savings.
Let's take a quick pause and do a couple of shout outs. I can see that a few people I know have joined, and unfortunately, I can't see the full list right now, but Jennifer DeMaya, do you follow Jennifer's Instagram? She's
I
based,
don't think so.
yeah, you have to check her out. I'll send you the link. Jennifer is based in the northwest of England, which is where I'm from.
Gotcha.
And she
Points there.
has a fantastic Instagram. And every day she's posting vintage posters, magazine pullouts of Mercedes primarily, but also Porsche. So if you just want to start your day right with some vintage content, you go to Jen's feed and you just look through her stories. That's fantastic. A second shout out, Todd, Stone City Outlaw. Todd has been following my channel for a while. He is based just outside of Chicago. He bought himself I'm now going to forget the number, 356, old school Porsche. It's like, it hasn't run in 45 years or 40 years. He's in the process of actually completely restoring it. So Todd, thank you for joining. And someone else I saw, my godson, Martin, in Germany, who lives in the homeland where Porsche is from. He is now watching. So, hey, Martin.
Lucky
Can you,
him.
can you see any of your peeps on the feed?
I can't see a full list there. I think I've seen a couple of them join, but yeah,
There,
my phone's actually turned in
well, me
a
too.
weird
There is
orientation.
Todd saying his 1957 356. Yeah,
Wow, that's going to be a fun project. I've done 996 and 993 and 991, but people always ask what's next, because the people that know me know that in 6 months' time this will be done and I'm going to probably flip it to something else. So they always ask me what I want to do next, and part of me is incredibly intrigued by going pretty old, either early 911 or 356 912. Thought about a 914-6 build, which could be awesome if you could find
yeah,
one for decent money that requires a build, not already kind of blue chip. But yeah, the older ones, area territory I haven't even dipped the toe into. And my only concern would be that I love DIY so much, and I don't know, this doesn't seem as much DIY potential there. That's really one where you got to engage someone which knows what the hell they're doing on
yeah.
some of those older builds.
Well, I think my fear about buying the vintage cars, one is just the availability of parts. Practicality wise, you could be sitting around for 6 months waiting to find a part. Where for a 991, you can go online, order it, and it'll be there in a few days. But as we've come to discover, Pat, Steve, and I working on the 996, that car's now nearly 19 years old. You go and do one job, and because the components around it are so old,
Yeah.
sometimes you're actually into it for more than what you're planning to do. So you go and remove one component and something else breaks. And so you're actually doing 2 jobs. And that would be my fear with a car as old as that from the 50s and 60s. You do one job, you got 10 jobs to do.
Yeah, you need a contingency fund for all the
Yeah.
collateral damage, to your point. Just trying to
I'm
take off
guessing you
one
work in
part.
finance.
Yeah, it could definitely screw you up. No, it's a good point. I do think they'd be kind of fun to do something pretty old. But more realistically, honestly, I think 964 is a car that I would love to own and do a build on. I think it would be just right. I was on the fence completely between the 964 and 993 when I got the 993.
Right.
Glad I did. I really love the 993, and I bought that at the time for all the right reasons. But the 964 is popular for a reason. It's an amazing car. It's sort of the best of everything, old and new. But tough to get your hands on them. Not that 993s are easy to find either, but that may be what's next. Let me ask you a question that's actually interesting. It kind of plays back to the old one and parts availability. So when you do all of your mods and builds on your cars, do you keep every stock part with the intention of potentially putting it back to stock for resale at some point? Or do you sell parts or give parts or both to either fund builds or help out people that are looking for stuff? Or what's your philosophy on that?
It's actually a combination of all of those things. So in some instances, like take the 996, I've had to replace one of the headlights because it was cracked. Somebody in Romania wants the back side of the light, doesn't want the lens, but wants the body. So he's paying for shipping, and I'm just giving him that part for free. Just, go for it. It was going to sit in my cupboard for a while.
Right.
Usually when I take rims off cars, I'll sell the rims to help, sort of pay down the cost of the new rims. But with the 997 in the basement, much to my wife Ruthie's dismay, I've got the stock bumper and the stock deck lid boxed. So you can imagine how big that bumper box is.
Takes up a good amount of space, yeah.
It's taking up a lot of space, yeah. So I've got sort of parts laying around everywhere. But if there's something that's relatively high value that I know I can flip without, really having to try, I'll put it on Facebook Marketplace or eBay. If it doesn't sell in a couple of days, I'll just take it down and it'll sit in my garage. But I don't like clutter. Yeah. I really don't like clutter. So the idea of parts stacking up around me sort of freaks me out a little bit. And even my overhead storage here right above me, I wish I didn't have to have that, because it's stuff that I will never touch again. How about you?
Yeah, just straight fire sale. I mean, I literally sell every bolt. And so a lot of discussion on Michael's episode, as you know, was what's the cost of these things, right? I mean, 993 looks spectacular. It looks like you spent a fortune on it. Was that the case? 991 certainly has a potential to be expensive bill. You're talking ECU tunes, DSC controllers, forged wheels. I mean, these are not inexpensive items, but that's always been my way of accomplishing these things. So just out of practical reasons, I always sell everything. And, what's remarkable, and, this is probably not unique to Porsche, but it's probably a very small group of car manufacturers. The amount of money you can get for an OEM part is astonishing. I mean, because people need them. And if the factory is charging $1,000 for something, you selling it for $600 or $700 is still a very good value proposition to an owner. So I sell everything, to fund the builds, but also I am Mr. No Clutter. I mean, we are super organized, and so it drives me nuts. We have a fully unfinished basement, and even the amount of parts that are down there right now from the 991 build that haven't sold yet is driving us nuts. And so we sell everything, but that's a lifestyle. Like at our house, if we need to upgrade a computer monitor, the old monitor is immediately for sale. It's out. I mean, it's going somewhere else. Yeah. So we're flipping parts. My wife sort of jokes, or I joke with her, I guess, that I have like a sort of shipping and receiving department in our basement, because it's like I have boxes, I have bubble wrap, I have like tape, I have like a station set up to box, ship, and sell parts I'm not using from builds.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. And so the parts that I can sell help fund my projects. I started my auto-amateur online web store earlier in the summer, partly because people were asking for stuff, especially the Joy Auto CarPlay device. But also that, every $100 I sell on the web store just goes to pay for new equipment or for a part for the car. So it all kind of goes back into it. But no, that's interesting.
So you've got a web presence and a web store, and obviously a large channel. So tell me a little bit about how that's been going, because I'm curious. So I've been doing this probably in earnest for a year, and feel like getting some good traction. But I'm curious to know what your experience has been in terms of different social platforms and just how the channel sort of evolved and those kinds of things.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was very much just a bit of a hobby at first. It still is a hobby. I'm not going to quit my day job and do this full time. But it has been sort of an interesting journey. Since doing the modifications to the 997, that's when I started to get quite a bit of interest in the videos. And YouTube is my home. I think YouTube will always be my home. What I like about platforms like Instagram is that I don't need to spend hours editing content. I can put up a quick video or a nice, whatever, and I can engage with people. And I think the more and more I do it, the more I appreciate the connections I've made through it. So it's not a money maker for me. It's not something I'm going to retire on. What I really get a buzz from, quite frankly, is just making friends and making connections with people in the community. There's the old maxim that a lot of people in the Porsche world around here say, which is you come for the cars, but you stay for the people. And that's absolutely true. I've made really good friends around the world just by doing live chats like this, by instant messaging, and just by backwards and forwards on the comments on my videos. So YouTube is definitely my home. The website is a bit of fun, kind of makes me feel like I'm putting a professional touch to some of the stuff that I'm doing.
Right.
But again, it's just another platform for sharing. But I think if you have to boil it all down, leave me with YouTube. I'll be happy with a little bit of Instagram on the side, and I'm good.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's first of all, I'm totally on the same wavelength. I mean, me kind of creating this channel, brand, whatever, was totally selfish. It was basically this acknowledgement for me that A, I want an excuse to throw myself into this, but more importantly, I just want to meet a bunch of people who are
Yeah.
like-minded. And I feel like in the Porsche space, and this is not a knock by any means, because I go to a lot of the PCA events here, but if your only medium for meeting Porsche people is PCA, inevitably it's just going to be a specific slice of the ownership group.
Yeah.
You look at the stats in any major market, especially here in the States, and something like 20% of total Porsche owners are actually part of the PCA. So there's, 80% of the people out there that own these cars and might be into them that that's not their thing, or they don't know about it, or they didn't sign up
Yeah.
for it. They didn't want to spend the money, which is very cheap, but some people just don't want to spend anything on that. So I think that's was probably the most selfish component of doing this whole thing, was just I want to put myself out there, meet new people, and that's been remarkable how quickly that's taken off. And so I think, as you've probably seen, it's a testament to the fact that through YouTube or Instagram or other channels, there is a tremendous amount of pent up demand
Yeah.
for engagement around Porsche that isn't through what I'll call more like structure, organized things, right? But then, the flip side is, like you said, kind of the personal, kind of satisfaction. So YouTube, I get a ton out of as well. As much work as it is to create those videos, and as discouraging as it can be to throw up a video and get, like 50 views, you're like, good God, I spent like 4 hours editing that thing.
Yeah.
It's a slower channel. I'd say the Instagram is really all about instant gratification. I mean, you
Yeah.
post something and all of a sudden, oh shoot, you have like 200-300 likes. Like, that's awesome. So that's very personally satisfying. But
Yeah.
YouTube is really, I think, just a remarkable platform in general. And there's so much value to that. But I think the longer term play of being part of that community and putting those videos up, especially like how-to stuff or user experience stuff, to me, it's fascinating. And I like being part of that as an avid user of YouTube, especially as a DIYer.
Yeah.
Obligation to put that stuff up. So it's a labor of love. It can be thankless at times, but eventually you do build a following. And I think they're more sticky, like they're more dedicated because they've made a little more of an investment to kind of go through the extra, well, let's be honest, 2 or 3 steps to
Yeah.
subscribe to your YouTube channel. But
Yeah. Yeah.
it's easy to be more passively engaged, I guess, on Instagram would be my take versus more
I think
actively
so.
engaged.
Yeah, I think so. Well, one thing I really have enjoyed about YouTube, sort of the analytics that I get back from it, and I can see where people around the world are watching and so on. But like somebody actually just joined, Barry, who was also on a podcast with Michael Bath recently. He's also from the northwest of England. He actually lives in Lancashire, which is where part of my family live. It's incredible how small this world is. That some random Brit in the middle of America is making a video that somebody in the UK watches, and I ended up growing up like 50 miles away from where he lives.
Yes,
That to me is madness.
it really is. And so just circling back to DRT, to me, that was what was so fascinating about going down there for the first time last year was, all these kind of connections I've made through YouTube or through Instagram, through these channels, were so easy to make, first of all, in this medium, because it really does bring people together around a shared experience, right? So you have instant connection.
Yeah.
But then to be able to parlay that into in-person interaction, I mean, there were people, Sean from Ren 11 is a good example, over in the UK, who, as soon as we both realize we're in the same room, it's like, oh, hey man, what's up? Like, it's very fluid, right? It's very natural. And so it's a remarkable thing we've got these social platforms to be able to connect. I'm
Yeah.
doing a podcast with Mike was in Bahrain. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
like a 12, 11, 12, whatever the time difference is.
Yeah.
But again, it's immediate kind of connection, which is a very unique thing. I don't know that there are as many passions. I mean, I can think of some, of course, but not a lot of passions where you're already on such a kind of level playing field and shared kind of thread of interest that it makes it very easy to just do this, just connect
Yeah.
with somebody and immediately have so many different things to talk about, so much that you're interested in. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I'm thankful for the platform. And, I think the more people around the world kind of get connected around this concept, the better. And, it'd be
Agreed.
interesting to see what Porsche does around that, to be honest.
Yeah, I know. I've noticed
Because
that PCA have started to push out more content on their YouTube page, and
they
it's
have,
been
yeah.
very much more sort of like in-depth, technical this, technical that. Yeah, it's interesting to see how they'll react to this. I know in some cases they've tried to shut people down from doing
Yeah.
certain stuff.
So yeah, I think that's really misguided, honestly. It's free advertising, so I'm not really following the reasoning behind that. But I will say I think their tune's changing a little bit. And so I've had the luxury of interacting with some of the folks over at Porsche through some connections I have around some of their digital stuff and just social and how they're engaging the communities through technology platforms. And
Yeah,
in my opinion, based on those interactions, they're definitely looking at this at a whole new light. And they realize that owners, particularly younger owners that are getting in the brand, they're just more socially inclined, technology focused, and that's kind of an untapped area that they should be leveraging for their brand. I mean, why
yeah.
not? Those are people that want to buy vehicles.
Plus,
And so I think that culture is changing a little bit. And I think some of it's probably just generational in terms of who's at Porsche corporate and, kind of more incoming, probably younger people and, managerial type roles that are saying, this is where we need to be as an organization, guys.
yeah,
So to your point, PCA, Porsche, I think they're doing a much better job with all that.
I think so too. Couple more shout outs. Mike from Capital Exotics in Ottawa. Hey, Mike. Mike also has his own YouTube channel. I mentioned Barry from Lancashire. My good friend Katie from Minnesota has just joined. I think Katie represents the 1% of my viewers that are female. maybe there are a handful of more out there as well. But welcome to the conversation, folks. Yeah, I think, Porsche obviously want to sell cars, and people in their 20s and 30s typically don't go out and look for the brand new Porsches. They go and buy the second hand. So directly, Porsche aren't making money from those transactions. Having said that, though, they need to be serviced, and they need, so I think the younger generation are making money for Porsche, at least at the dealership level, going to get their 20, 30, 40K services done, or, idiots like me that want to spend $5,000 on an exhaust and
Yeah, exactly.
retrocon.
Yeah, but they also maybe they don't want to go buy new now, right?
Yeah.
But Porsche's also created such an experience around speccing a car. I mean, let's be honest. The typical dealer, the spec of a car is like, hey, I want it in this color. Like, okay, wait a couple weeks and we'll get one in red. Porsche's, it's an entire experience, and that's what they're selling for that much upside or expense. And so there's something very desirable about it's sort of a rite of passage, I think, amongst a lot of Porsche owners. If you can get, and most of us will never maybe get there, to be clear. So it's not that it's a requirement, but they've made it such an experience, especially here in Atlanta, like being able to take, for instance, delivery of your spec vehicle at PEC. Yeah, I mean, that's, I've never been there in person for one, but I know a couple people have done that, and I've seen enough of their videos and promotions on that and I've been down there so many times to know that must just be the coolest thing ever. And so, maybe you buy secondhand or fourth hand or eighth hand, to start, but this brand is so sticky that I would argue strongly that as those people grow up and, come into more income and what have you, they continue to buy the parts and do the services, to your point, right? So that's residual income for them as Porsche. But also, I would argue strongly they eventually potentially walk into a dealership and buy a car brand new or buy a CPO because they want to pay that little bit extra for kind of that high touch white glove service, the, kind of risk management, everything. So I think that is, a demographic that they will continue to hopefully focus on. And that's kind of what I've seen so far. So the people I'm talking to.
And I think I'm on that path as well, because my 4 or 5 911s that I've owned have all been secondhand, from the used market. Just wait, another 5-10 years, I get to the demographic in the age bracket where people buy Porsches for the first time. Whether it's a 992 or a well, 4 maybe instead of the
Right.
993.
Yeah. Yeah. Where will we be by then?
You know, I at some point I imagine I'll be configuring my brand new 911 and rolling off, and that was because Porsche planted that seed in my head, you know, back in the 80s, back in the early 90s when I saw, you know, the black turbo in Bad Boys, and I've always wanted a 911 since seeing that movie, or probably earlier, but you know.
Yeah, I mean it's iconic, and there's a lot of stickiness around the brand. So I too would love to do that. I think, although I was on the fence actually a little bit about getting a GT3 versus a Carrera S, and part of what I decided I didn't want to do with a GT3, not that you can't modify GT3, to be clear, you can, but to me it's so well done from the factory that I probably wouldn't do much to it.
Oh, I would.
Um,
Come on.
and
Yeah, you
so,
would.
well, it also gets in that territory where I'm not like I don't ever purchase these cars for an investment. I did really well in my 993, but that was not the plan, and that was really just timing. But in a GT3, especially like a 991 variant GT3, I have to be honest, I have kind of that hesitation around wanting to maybe keep a little more stock just because it is a 991 GT3.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know. So I didn't want to do a lot to that. And so part of me wonders if I ever will be that guy who goes in and does a factory spec, at the dealer kind of thing, because I love to kind of figure out maybe more of the, I don't know, back end sort of workaround type of things to do to these cars,
Yeah.
mix and match of different mods from sort of third parties. And I don't know if I'll be that person that walks into a dealer and specs one from scratch, unless my time becomes so much more valuable that's the calculation, right? Which is I don't have the time, or my time needs to be on something else. So
Right.
I'm going to go in and have the dealer take
Right.
care of it. And then you're paying for that convenience, which has a value, to be clear. So
Right.
we'll see.
But unless you have 2 cars, you have your new one and then you have your worker.
That's true. Yeah, I guess if you have a project car and a new one, then you're in really good shape. I'm not at that level. I envy you to have multiple. I mean, I am a one Porsche family at the moment. I think it's going to stay that for a while, which I'm lucky to have just one, to be clear. So,
Oh, me too as well. Absolutely.
yeah,
And in fact, my wife and I have a 3rd child on the way, due in May. So I'm not sure if that's going to, sort of like push me to go and do as much as I can now, or pump
right.
the brakes
Yeah,
a little bit come next
you
year.
may want to get it in. You have two now, right?
I do. Well, the project car is a flip car. We're going to
Right.
work on it, we're going to sell it, and then move on to the next project.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's tough to find the time with kids. I think that's something I've tried to figure out how to do projects in a really bite-sized fashion, right? Which is, I have like an hour here, so I know I can get this far on the project, but I need to get to a good stopping point where a bunch of stuff's not unbolted and it's still pretty drivable because
Yeah.
I know that I don't have spans of like 8 hours typically to do whole projects. So the exhaust will be interesting. Luckily, it's over the break. I've got a buddy coming to help and film for the channel on how to do it, and so yeah, that's going to be a little bit of time investment. But yeah, doing it with kids. I mean, you just did your basement. I mean, finding those little areas to do.
Oh, I think I lost you there for a second. No, there you go.
No.
So a couple more shout outs. We have a celebrity joining us right now. 993 Andy from Road to Redline fame. Andy, thank you very much for joining if you're still there. Which brings me on to the next thing I wanted to talk to you about, which is what are some of your favorite content creators out there? Like one of the first things that got me over the edge of becoming a Porsche, well, being a Porsche fan and then being a Porsche owner was Total 911 magazine, which I happened to find buyer's guide when I was thinking about buying, and it helped push me over the edge. It gave me, the knowledge, the awareness, what I needed to go and buy the car. Since then, Total 911, I'm all about Total 911. Lee Sibley, who's the editor, he's that 911 guy on YouTube. His content is phenomenal. Plus, he's a super nice guy. And then 993 Andy, he and Lee and another guy, Joe, they started a podcast. I don't know if you follow it, called Road to Redline, which launched about a year ago. And it's 3 guys talking about their love of cars, but primarily Porsche. They put out a podcast every week. And just like Michael at Porsche Cooled, I live for their podcast every week. I just love driving around listening to their stuff. Now, what I get from that content is I feel sort of connected to the Porsche community. It's not DIY stuff. It's not mods necessarily, but I just kind of feel connected to that wider world of content. And they're some of my favorites. How about you?
Yeah, long list. So, I mean, on the magazine front, subscriber to both Triple Zero and Duck and Whale, like both for different reasons. I mean, Duck and Whale is remarkable in the sense that it's very graphically focused. You know, if you kind of understand the history behind the magazine, how it came to fruition, it's graphic design sort of, you know, kind of roots, and so it's beautiful and it's very interesting, a little edgier. Triple Zero is, you know, just if anyone's ever picked one up or read one, it's a remarkable. Not only is the content incredible, but just everything about it is so meticulously curated. It's couldn't be more Porsche, in my opinion. If you turn Porsche into a magazine, that is Triple Zero.
Okay.
And so those are big ones. So I have subscriptions to both. Triple Zeros, it's an investment, but I guarantee it's worth it. People probably get on the website and they're like, wait, how much is this thing for 4 issues? And each one is a couple 100-page coffee table book. Think about it that way. Okay, so each issue is expensive, but you'd go out and pay $50, $7,500 for a nice Porsche book. That's basically what you get. On the podcast front, obviously Michael, having recently done his podcast and also listened to a lot of his episodes, alongside Drew at Cool Collective, probably the other sort of early seed, you know, inspiration, call it, for me getting so into this and building this channel was definitely P-Car Talk. So their podcast is spectacular. You know, I've gotten to spend a ton of time with Mike and Aaron, you know, who are in Tampa, who built that channel, and really get to know them, you know, on a personal level, which is awesome. And so what they're doing here in the States is very unique. You know, there's not really a lot of Porsche channels based here in the US, Porsche specific channels. And so definitely P-Car Talk, you know, I work a lot with them to kind of continue to push, you know, kind of membership and grow the ranks. And that's been super successful in the limited amount of time that they've been involved. So if you're interested in that and want to know how to join their club, let me know. But we do annual drives, all kinds of cool stuff that's part of their membership. And then on kind of the photography side, you know, you mentioned Drew, his stuff's just so unique. The aesthetic is just so unique. And that's with a lot of years of training, to be clear. He's very, very good. I'm actually going to take a photography class he's hosting here in the next little while, online virtual class he's going to host on, I'm sure, like lighting and exposure and just all this knowledge he has for more amateur, you know, photography type people like myself. There's a guy here in Atlanta, Winning Auto, Larry. He has got a auto. Some of the more remarkable car photography I've seen out there for sure. On the same level as, you know, kind of like Amy and, you know, others that you kind of, Alex Penfold, you know, really well-known, you know, kind of 50, 60,000 follower type car photography. He does a lot of Porsche stuff, does a lot of exotics. He's here in town. What's so crazy about him is super young. He's still in school, in college, university, and the amount of talent the guy has is nuts. But
I hate him.
Yeah, I know, right? But he's really humble about it too, which is cool. He's very, very unassuming, very low key. Really doesn't want to be kind of out in the public. He wants his content out there, obviously, but himself, he's very kind of behind the scenes. But he's the one that did all the studio shots of the My 993, the ones in the all white space. So yeah, he's great. And then, you know, on the YouTube front, you know, a little outside of Porsche, but podcast and YouTube, really, I'm a true disciple of Matt Morman. And so I eat up as much content from Obsessed Garage as I can. The trick is because, as you know, I think it's the bites are bigger than most in terms of time frames. So, you know, most of the stuff's an hour or two commitment, which I like in that he stuck to his guns, and that's his thing. And he, you know, builds his channel kind of in the way he sees fit and doesn't think everything has to be, you know, 10 minutes and 30 seconds to be digested. But Matt's stuff is amazing, you know, his podcast. And so I'm really into detailing, in addition to just the cars. I do all my own paint corrections, my own ceramic coatings, you know, you name it. And so I spend a lot of time on the Obsessed Garage channel.
I really like Matt's stuff as well, actually. I should have mentioned Obsessed Garage. It's funny, when I came across his channel, I don't know how to say this without offending Matt, and I really don't mean any offense, but he doesn't seem like the most approachable guy, let's put it that way. I watched his content because I loved what he was saying. I liked his style. I liked his sort of dedication to his passion, but I never thought he was a very approachable sort of guy. I've reached out to him a couple of times directly to ask him questions, and he couldn't have been more friendly, more generous with his time. I mean, what a nice guy. I love his stuff. I've got his hoodie. I've got all his products. I watch all of his stuff religiously, even if I do have to, you know, sort of bail out every now and again because it's an hour and a half long and I've only got half an
Yeah,
hour.
so I actually listen to a lot of it in the car, believe it or not. So I drive to a lot of stuff in general, but I also drive to a lot of events. So like DRT, I drove to Miami from Atlanta. It's about a 2 day trip, right? 10 hours or so. And so I actually get a lot of his stuff knocked out in the car, including his YouTube stuff, because his YouTube stuff almost listens like a podcast. I mean, the visual is helpful, but as you know, it's all stream of consciousness and it's,
Yeah.
pretty much uncut. And so you can actually put that on in your Redline
Oh,
holder,
there you
for
go.
instance,
Yeah. Yeah.
listen to it, kind of peer over every now and then. Of course, you're driving and focus on the road, of course, but that actually is stuff where even the YouTube stuff, I kind of listen to it like a podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, going back to your other point, I haven't met Matt, of course, but he's in, Orlando and very close to Atlanta. And a lot of the people I do know here are friends of his. And so your analysis is pretty spot on based on conversations I had with him, which is super nice guy. He comes off a little unapproachable, but some of that's just personality. And so it's really one of those things where once you reach out and connect, he really loves that. I mean, he really wants to connect with people.
Mm-hmm.
You just kind of have to get through that barrier a little bit. And I've had a similar experience. I sent him some kind of question about something very simple. And I almost was like, am I supposed to be emailing Matt or like support at, because this was before we even had like big domains for like support versus sales. I mean, this was early days. And he sent me like a 3-paragraph email back. It's like, how the heck does this guy have time to respond to me in that way? So yeah,
exactly.
He's very good dude. And what he's put together is just so unique.
It's incredible.
Concept wise, and speaks right to me, which is, I was always like, why the heck do I need to pay a professional detailer $3,000 to color correct my car? Like, I think I can do that myself. I'm pretty resourceful. I just don't know the right products. I don't want to buy 20 of them and kind of figure out which 19 are not worth a damn. So him giving you kind of the keys to the castle, so to speak, or the guidance there is just a brilliant concept.
Well, Andrew, I've got to get back to the daily grind, as I'm sure you have. This has been awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for setting up, and stay warm. I know it's probably chilly where you are, so
I like to stay cold. I'm a cold.
Okay, well, let's stay cold. But yeah, it's great talking to you.
Yeah, you too. And thanks to everyone that's been joining and waving. And we'll catch you in another live another time. Cheers, Andrew.
Cheers.
Bye.